Welcome to Opinion Journal. I'm Mary Kissel. The United Nations did a U-turn on the Syria peace talks over the weekend, first inviting Iran in and then disinviting that regime. What happened and what is the humanitarian situation really like inside Syria? I've got International Rescue Committee CEO David Miliband joining me now. David, you were Foreign Secretary of Great Britain. You've dealt with a lot of these players before. Aren't these talks a farce? I mean, setting aside what happened this weekend with
I think
this
there are
invitation?
two things for these talks. One is, will it bring peace? Because it's a so-called peace conference. The answer is no, it won't. Can it address some of the humanitarian issues? Yes, it can. And I'll tell you my fear about this Iranian imbroglio over the last 2 or 3 days. At the moment, there's no accountability in this war. There's no accountability for the crimes on the government side, no accountability on the rebel side, no accountability for the supporters of each side. And my fear is that if the Iranians aren't there, they're given a pass on what they're actually doing to support the regime, which is immiserating millions of its citizens.
But hasn't the UN Security Council made a presidential statement and said we must allow humanitarian aid into Syria? I mean, haven't they already basically made that demand? Are they enforcing it?
Well, the Council has spoken, and it's not clear. It's pretty clear that no one's really listening, and that endangers not just the UN as an institution, but the nations who sign up for this kind of presidential statement. A presidential statement in the UN doesn't have the ballast or the strength of a UN resolution. It doesn't have the enforcement mechanisms. And people like me argue that if a presidential statement is ignored, it should be taken to a resolution and then enforced.
So why isn't Britain or the United States standing up and screaming bloody murder about
There's
this?
quite a lot of screaming going on, but the divisions on the Security Council, we know that Russia and China have vetoed not just resolutions, but the prospect of resolutions. Those divisions are translating themselves into the humanitarian domain. I mean, my organization, International Rescue Committee, we are running supplies into Syria from around the neighboring countries. We're active in the neighboring countries. And what we see is the division and the inertia on the political side replicated on the humanitarian side, and that is costing people every day.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the humanitarian situation inside Syria. We've had a lot of numbers thrown around, 9 million people displaced, 250,000 cut off in homes in some of the other cities. What can be done to help these people if the Assad regime does not cooperate?
Well, if the Assad regime won't cooperate, which is they're certainly not at the moment, one's reduced to running medical supplies and doing education across border into rebel areas. But the importance of this conference, I think, is twofold. It may not bring peace, but it can change the conduct of the war if pressure is brought to bear, not just on the Assad regime, but on its supporters. Two things I think are important. One, the whole notion of a civilian, a non-combatant, has been lost in this war. I mean, you have pregnant women being victims of sniper attacks, you've got barrel bombs on bread queues. That notion has been in part of international law for 150 years, and it's made a mockery of. Secondly, and critically, you referred to the 250,000 Syrians who are cut off completely. There's another 2.5 million in what the UN call hard-to-reach areas. That means basically nothing's getting through to them. We know the Berlin blockade from 50 years ago. We know the blockade of Sarajevo 15, 20 years ago. This blockade in Aleppo, the largest city in Syria, now a divided city, that's going to go down in the annals alongside those other blockades. Because it's not just a problem of people like me saying we need quote-unquote access. There's a blockade, a siege, and this conference needs to put it on the table.
Right. Well, we're going to follow it closely. David Miliband, thank you very much.